G'day guys, I've just returned from RatCon 2025 where I placed first overall going undefeated with the World Eaters, running Hellbrutes in a really interesting list. So today I'm going to break down the event in great detail. We're going to go through my list in detail as well as every opponent's list from the event. We're going to go through the scores that I was able to achieve and I'm going to break down how I achieved those scores. We're going to pull out some terrain maps and I'm going to run you through where I position my units and why so that you can replicate these results for yourself. And then we're going to wrap up the video talking about where I think World Eaters are positioned in terms of competitive Warhammer 40k. So if that sounds interesting to you, stick around.
Exalted.
Unlike some other gaming systems, Warhammer 40k often requires an absolute boatload of dice to play. For example, watch me roll out my attacks with these 20 Khorne Berserkers. Follow the links in the description to get your Exalted dice today. Alrighty guys, let's just get stuck straight into it with a summary of my list. So here it is on BCP. So I ran the World Eaters, I ran it in the Berserkers Warband as per, almost every competitive player out there. I had the Demon Prince of Khorne. I didn't have any enhancements on him, couldn't afford it in the points, but I still think without enhancements, he's an absolute ripper of a unit. Then I also had Khan the Betrayer, absolute must-take, and the Slaughterbound with the Berserker's Glaive. Him in the Exalted 8-bound now, I think, is a must-take in the World Eaters as well. Then we've got a unit of 10 Berserkers for Khan to lead, a Rhino for those guys to jump inside, and then in our other data sheets we have 3 units of 2 Chaos Spawn. Now I know these guys went up in points, but I still think they're an absolute steal, and they perform a very important function in World Eaters lists, and I'll go through that in a moment. Then we've got 2 units of 8-bound. Now, these guys obviously projecting that aura, but also being pretty valuable beat sticks in their own right. For 135 points, I think they're fantastic. We've got the Exalted 8-bound, 140 points. They really activate that Slaughterbound, giving him the ability to rapid ingress deep strike is critical, and also dialing up the damage. That unit can kill almost anything in the game, so that's really, really cool. Then I had 2 Forge Fiends. Again, I know these guys went up in points, but I think it was well deserved because they're an amazing unit. I think a lot of people shy away from units after they get that points increase, but I was happy to pay it. So still got the 2 Forge Fiends. And then here's where the list gets a little bit more unique in that I have 2 Hellbrutes. Now these are units that I have been advocating for since the Codex dropped. I think they're one of the best units in the game. Definitely one of the best units in our Codex. For 120 points, they almost always get their value back. They are a really, really strong unit, and they facilitated a lot of the wins that I got this weekend. So I'll go through those in detail in each matchup to explain how I use the Hellbrutes and how I get the value out of it, because I think this is something that a lot of competitive players are overlooking, and I think they're doing themselves a disservice in doing so. And then we round the list out with a single unit of Jackals. You know them, you love them, they stick in your home, they screen out your backfield. So it's a pretty MSU sort of World Eaters list. Like, we don't have the big 20-man units of Berserkers, we don't have any 6-man units of 8-bound, there's no 10-man Terminator units. Like, I've taken a lot of small units, but I think that's how World Eaters play best. I think our units generally hit hard enough that you don't really need those big units. You can get away with the small units, and having multiple pieces allows you to keep that trading game going all game long. And this is also one of the reasons I like the Hellbrutes, because they're dirt cheap. They're only 120 points. So that having a couple of Hellbrutes in there means that you're likely to unlock another unit that you might otherwise not have been able to afford. So that's the list. I was really, really happy with the way it performed, and we'll break down in detail in each matchup how this list performed. So that's the list. Let's jump into round 1. Exalted40k.com, where you can find a huge range of our apparel, a massive range of gaming merchandise, our community section, and our downloads library. Visit exalted40k.com today. Alrighty, let's have a look at round 1. So I played into Tyson Gleason, absolutely fantastic bloke. He was running the Strike Force Chaos Demons, the Demonic Incursion. Now this is typically quite a hard matchup for World Eaters, and I'll explain why in a moment, but he had Be'lakor, He had a Bloodthirster with the King of Blades. He had a Great Unclean One with the Endless Gift, and that guy's the problem. He then had Fate Weaver. He had a Lord of Change. He had 3 units of Nurglings. He had 3 units of Flamers, just small units of Flamers. And then he had a unit of Fleshhound, 2 units of Fleshhounds. So that was his list. Really, really cool list. It was really well balanced, and that Great Unclean One was presenting quite the challenge to me. But I was able to mitigate it quite well in the game, and I'll go through that with you now. First, let's have a look at the scores. So as you can see here, we had a 92-22 victory to myself. And as you can see, I maxed out my primary and almost maxed out my secondaries, got quite high, whereas Tyson, unfortunately, really struggled to get his primary and got almost no secondaries. So it was a really heavily favored game for me, and there was a few moments in the game that swung it really hard in my favor, that really, really hurt Tyson. So this is the map we played on. As you can see, it's one of the GW maps. Now, these weren't perfect representations of the GW maps because some of the terrain features that we had were from previous event formats, so they weren't 100% similar to this, but close enough. You get an approximation. And basically, we were playing, what was the mission? Do I have the mission on here? Yeah, Purge the Foe, and I think it was Table Quarters deployment. So he was up in this corner, I was down in this corner. And basically what happened is, throughout the course of the game, he basically sent some Fleshhounds down this side, he sent a Bloodthirster down this side, and the Great Unclean One down the center. And I had a Rhino staged in behind this ruin here, and I was further than 1 inch from the wall, so his big monsters couldn't charge me. I had Forge Fiend down here, second Forge Fiend in reserves, Hellbrute running along here, second Hellbrute in reserves, 8-bound coming up this direction, over here, and a 8-bound unit coming in this direction over here. And then I had Spawn dotted along the line, and the Exalted 8-bound and the Slaughterbound in rapid ingress. Basically, he sent some Fleshhounds down this way, I sent Spawn and 8-bound around, and then in the second turn I was able to jump out with the Spawn, kill those Fleshhounds, which then denied one of his secondaries. He was going for a Sabotage. And I had an objective back here that I was holding with the 8-bound, and he sent a Bloodthirster out this way, and I was able to send a Hellbrute around this corner, the Forge Fiend that I deployed here, and then a second Forge Fiend that I brought on from from strategic reserves. And basically the 2 Forge Fiends shot at the Bloodthirster, did a handful of wounds to it. Then the Hellbrute hits the Bloodthirster, does a tank shock, does a bunch more wounds to it, then strikes the Bloodthirster with his Thunderhammer, and killed him. So that was really brutal. It actually came down to a really interesting situation where I got him down to 1 wound remaining. He then killed the Hellbrute, but the Hellbrute exploded, killing the Bloodthirster. So quite lucky there, but ultimately I think that Hellbrute with the tank shock and then striking should have killed the Bloodthirster anyway. But that was really good. So basically I'd killed that off that objective, and then I'd killed off of this objective. He then moved his big fat guy up into the middle. At that point, I used some Spawn to just move block him so that he couldn't get any further down. In his turn, he brought the 2 Lord of Changes along here and all the Flamers so that he could kill the Forge Fiend that was over on this side of the board. But in doing so, I was able to rapid ingress my second Hellbrute down here, and then in my turn, that Hellbrute went in and killed all the Flamers and one of the Lord of Change and almost killed Fate Weaver as well. So those Hellbrutes are absolutely mental if you can position them well. And in a board like this, I could have come over here, I could have came down here, I had a few different options. But he basically goes in, he fights 1 unit of Flamers, kills it, piles into the one next to it. They fight him, fail to kill him because they're Flamers. He then fights, kills them, piles into the next one, rinse and repeat. And he was able to do that and just run through a massive chunk of that Daemons army. And that really stopped my opponent from being able to run over me. In that same turn that all of that combat happened, Khan and his boys jumped out here. They went behind that Great Unclean One and killed Be'lakor. And basically now my opponent was left with a wounded Fate Weaver and a full health Great Unclean One. But pretty much everything else was dead. And that put my opponent in a position where he couldn't hold any primary. He couldn't score anything. And if he drew action secondaries, he would have to waste one of his giant monsters doing an action, And that was the problem. I think his list probably should have had one less big monster and more stuff, so that he could screen me out, so that he could respond to my small things without presenting a big thing, and so that he would have disposable units to do actions and stuff. But yeah, so that was the way that that game sort of panned out. Absolute bloodbath, and a really strong start to the event. Alright, let's have a look at round 2. So I played a bloke named Michael. He's actually a fan of the channel, so g'day Michael. It was a great game. And he was playing the CSM, my other love. So it was a really, really interesting game. And interestingly, our lists were somewhat similar. So he had Cypher, he had Vashtor, he had a Chaos Lord, he had a Lord Discordant, and then he was doing Pack Bound, and then he had a Cultist Mob, a Legionary squad for the Lord to go in, and then he had 10 Possessed, 5 Possessed, 5 Possessed, then he had 10 Warp Talons, 2 units of 3 Bikers, 2 Forge Fiends, and a Rhino. So it was similar in that it was 2 Forge Fiends. I had 2 Forge Fiends, so did he. I had a Rhino with a combat unit inside, so did he. He had 3 units of Possessed. I had 2 units of 8-bound and 1 unit of Exalted 8-bound. So there was a lot of similarities in the list, in the construction. I really, really liked his list, but I think the World Eaters do this job better, I think, in totality. I think the unit that comes out of my Rhino is better than the unit that comes out of his. I think my Forge Fiends are better than his Forge Fiends. I think my Possessed, or my 8-bound, are better than his Possessed. He did have the Warp Talons, which were a scary thing for me, because I knew he was going to be able to just kill me and then disappear, and that was going to be really frustrating. So my game plan worked around eliminating the Warp Talons, and that would basically take away his advantage and secure an advantage for myself. So let's have a look at the scores now. So this is the scores that I was able to achieve. So it was a 96-41, so another very dominant win for me. As you can see, once again, maxed out my primary, and I got 36 on my secondaries, so nearly maxed them out as well. Michael did much better though. He got a 15 primary, and he managed to get 16 out of his 40 secondaries. So much, much closer, but as you can see, his primary scores were quite low, and that's because one of the things World Eaters do almost better than anything else is they just push people off those primary objectives. We're really, really good at doing that. So I was able to do that with pretty good effect, and keep his primary just down to a 5 the whole time, whilst I was scoring those 10s and 15s. And also there was a few times where he drew secondaries that required him to do actions, like, for example, cleanse here, recover assets, and these were instances where he needed to do actions, but he didn't have the disposable units because all of his units were busy engaging me in fights. So that really slowed him down, and then also, because the game was played so aggressively, we were both throwing units at each other, we both ran out of units relatively fast. So before it got to that turns 4 and 5, most of their stuff was already dead. So it was very hard for him to get that no prisoners and get that assassinate, because he has limited stuff, and the stuff that I have is limited as well, so it's really far away from him, making it very difficult for him to score those secondaries. But let's flip over and have a look at the board, and have a look at the board state. This is a rough approximation of the board that we played on, and like I said, it's not a one-to-one copy, like the terrain was slightly different, but it was approximated on this. And basically, it wasn't really that many notable things. One of them was that we were playing, I think it was Tipping Point is... No, what's the one? Linchpin. I'm never sure which one's the deployment type. The one where you've got like the sort of the Tetris-y looking deployment. And he had Warp Talons back here, and that's basically, I was able to deploy my spawn on the line. I got first turn, so I was actually able to send a spawn into his Warp Talons in the first turn and killed 3 of them. And then he failed to kill that spawn. He killed 1.5 spawn in return, which was really good because it meant that those Warp Talons, if he wanted to advance and if he wanted to fall back and charge, it was going to cost him command points, so he didn't do that. It also meant that those Warp Talons were now weakened, and weakening those Warp Talons is really important, because if they fail to kill the thing that they charge, they can't disappear. So 10 of them will reliably kill almost anything, but 7 of them, maybe not so much, So I killed him down to 7. Then the next turn I threw another unit of spawn in and killed 4 that turn. So now we've down to like 3 left, and at that point I was like, I don't really care about them anymore. So that was how I dealt with them, was just kept throwing spawn into them. Spawn are really good into them because they've got that, if you spend a CP, you're getting them to AP2, which pushes them to their invulnerable save, and that 2 damage is really, really good. The strength 7 is really, really good into marine bodies, so yeah, the spawn were the perfect tool for dealing with that problem. And meanwhile, I had my Forge Fiend dealing with his possessed. There was a really interesting moment there where I got to introduce him to the Hellbrutes and how they work. So he threw a unit of bikes out into the middle, and then about 6 inches behind it was his Forge Fiend, and I was able to jump out with the Hellbrute, charge the bikes. With the charge move, I went around behind the bikes, and then I fought something elsewhere, killed it, used that to turn on the 6-inch pylon and consolidate. Then I fight with the Hellbrute, kill the bikes, 6-inch pylon into the Forge Fiend. Then the Forge Fiend fights me, fails to kill me. Then I fight, killing the Forge Fiend was the plan. I don't think I killed it, but I got it down to almost dead. So I got to introduce into the way the Hellbrutes work. And then in a later turn, I had a Hellbrute that rapid ingressed here and was able to come around this side, and it killed... What did that Hellbrute kill? It killed some possessed, it killed a Rhino, it killed a Chaos Lord, it killed a ton of stuff. Like that Hellbrute went around this side and did some heavy damage. I'm not 100% sure, but he killed like 3 units. So the Hellbrutes did a lot of heavy lifting in this game as well. And Khan was really good. There was one point when I sent Khan out, killed a bunch of stuff, almost killed Vashdor. Vashdor then fought back, killed most of Khan's unit. Then with some possessed, they killed the rest of them. But then with Khan getting back up at the end of the phase, he's charged me, kills everything. Khan gets back up at the end of the fight phase, and then we go into my turn, and I was able to send Khan out to go kill another thing. So Khan was so good in this matchup. He was amazing. So yeah, that was how the fight went down in round 2.
G'day guys, check out our merchandise at exalted40k.com, including sets of range rulers with 9, 6, 3, 2 and 1 inch faces, as well as 1 inch markings all the way along, making quick and accurate measurements a breeze. Rectangular blessings trackers for convenient record keeping, and chain axe blessing trackers for when merely taking records is not good enough. Dice and dice trays that in tandem ensure your rolls do not betray you like a certain someone on the killing fields of Scalathrax. Objective markers for an exalted gaming experience that are just begging to be drowned in the blood of friend or foe on the battlefield. Show your support for the channel and head over to exalted40k.com to equip yourself as an exalted wargamer today.
Alright, round 3 was into a good friend of mine, Josh Pope, running a very, very interesting list. Josh Pope, I think he won RatCon one year, or he came second maybe. He's a very, very talented player from South Australia, one of the South Australia team members, so I knew this game was going to be a hard one, and he was running Dark Angels, which is also often a very hard matchup for the World Eaters. So he was running the Wrath of Rock detachment. He had Azrael, he had a Captain in Gravis armor with a Ancient Weapons enhancement. I think that just makes him a bit more of a beatstick. He had a Captain in Terminator armor, he had a Lieutenant, and then he had the Lionel Johnson, and he also had Samael. So tons of characters. He was playing a bit of a Hero Hammer style game. Then he had 2 big units of Deathwing Knights. He had a unit of Inner Circle Companions, which was with Azrael. He had a couple of Invader ATVs. He had 2 Invader ATVs. He had an Outrider squad that Samael joined. And then he had 2 Vanguard units with jump packs and a Calidus Assassin. So a really, really interesting list. The thing that I was mainly concerned about in this list was Lionel Johnson, because he has fights first. So if you send Lionel Johnson out into the middle with no protection, like no units around him, it can be very difficult for the World Eaters to actually combat him, because Forge Fiends don't do amazing work into him, and because he's got that invulnerable save and he's hard to wound, so like the Forge Fiends don't solve that problem for you, and anything that you throw in to try to fight him in combat is going to be very, very hard pressed to kill him. So I was worried he was going to shove shove the lion down my throat. And then there's also the big chunk of those Deathwing Knight units with Armor of Contempt can be quite difficult to fight through. But we managed to get it done. I made some massive mistakes in this game, though, so I want to break those down with you as well. Even though I did get the win, I want to still talk about the mistakes that I made. So let's flip it over and have a look at the map. Alright, so first let's have a look at the scores, sorry. So it was a 91 to 72, so a decent sized win still. As you can see, I got a 45 on primary, so I'm almost maxed that and almost maxed my secondaries. Whereas Josh got a 35 on his primary and a 27 on his secondary. So I was just ahead of him in both areas. It actually was feeling really tight most of the game. As you can see, in the first turn, I got 9 points, he got 8. In the second turn, I got 12 points, he got 12 points. In the third turn, I got 19 points, he got 22 points. So up until turn 3, he was kind of winning. But then turn 4, I got a 15 primary and he got nothing. And then turn 5, I got a 10 primary and so did he. So it was really that turn 4 where it sort of swung. And that's because we were both playing quite cagey. I was playing cagey because I was afraid of the lion, and he was playing cagey. I'm not entirely sure why. I feel like if he had aggroed me, he would have probably done a lot better, because I just had so much stuff left at the end of the game that I was able to jump out and do all of the actions I needed to do for my secondaries whilst jumping out onto all the objectives. And it was very difficult for him to stop me from doing that. Towards the end of the game, I'd taken his home objective off him. I was all up in his face, making it very difficult for him to score those points. But let's have a look at the map now. Alright, so here's the map. Like I said, rough approximation. And basically, I had Demon Prince down here with a Forge Fiend and a second Forge Fiend in reserves. Pretty much every game I had a Hellbrute, a Forge Fiend, and Slaughterbound and the 8-bound in reserves. Everything else on the board. And the real pivotal moments in this was in his first turn. So I got first turn. I didn't do a great deal. I threw some spawn out onto the center objective to get area denial, I think it was. And then the rest of my army just sort of stayed outside of his effective charge range. I moved over onto this objective here. I sort of turtled up over here. And then in his first turn, he basically sent a unit out here and charged and killed those spawn. And then he sent it of his Deathwing Knights, and then he sent a second Deathwing Knights unit here that could deep strike turn 1. So he deep striked that down here and was going for a 9-inch charge, and he failed that charge. So then when we took over into my turn 2, I was able to throw Khan and his Berserkers were here. They jumped out of the Rhino and charged that unit of Deathwing Knights. And he had some stuff staged up in this ruin here and this ruin here, but none of it was within 6 inches of the front of his unit. It was within 6 inches of the back, but I basically strung my charge in such a way that I would only be base contacting the guys at the front. I wouldn't have to wrap around. And the way that you do that is you basically make sure that one model in your unit's real close, but the rest of the unit's strung out back here. And that way when you make your big charge, the front guys can base contact, so they just base contact along the front. And then all these guys that are strung out back here, they don't have enough distance to base contact, so they can just come up behind, and then with the 6-inch pylons and consolidates, they can wrap around. And that's the way that you do that. Whereas if you had a ball of guys right here, that ball of guys roll a big charge, and some of them would have to go around and base contact at the back. So I strung out here, made sure that I charged them to get out of his heroic range, which meant he couldn't send the Lion in, he couldn't send Azrael in. And then I put some 8-bound up behind to give +1 to hit to those Khorne Berserkers. And then, so that was my plan for dealing with that central unit. And then I had a plan to deal with the unit that he dropped over here. And that was basically take one Forge Fiend, move it up, bring the second Forge Fiend on from reserve. So you got 2 Forge Fiends aiming at them. And then I had a Hellbrute in the middle here. And the Hellbrute was going to move over there and fight as well. And the theory was that 2 Forge Fiends would kill, half the unit. The Hellbrute would charge, kill 1 or 2 more, which would only leave 1 or 2 guys left. Those 1 or 2 guys wouldn't be able to kill the Hellbrute in return, which would then mean the Hellbrute would get to fight again and finish off the unit. That was the plan. So I moved my Forge Fiends on, I moved Khan's unit up, and I got so carried away with Khan's unit and the movement on that and making sure that I was placing correctly to make sure that that charge worked, that I then went into my shooting phase, went into my charge phase, and then when I went to charge that Hellbrute, I realized I'd forgotten to move it, and I was 12 inches away. And I was like, damn it, I was supposed to move it over there and it was going to be a 3-inch charge. Now it's an 11-inch charge. And I was like, oh, well, mistakes were made. And so I rolled it, failed the charge, and then the problem there was the Forge Fiend's shot killed half the unit, but then when it ticked over into his turn, those couple of guys that survived were able to jump down, charge the Forge Fiends, and tag them. Took them the whole game to kill them, but it basically meant those Forge Fiends were eliminated because they couldn't shoot into the combat they were in, and because they were tucked all the way down here, behind this ruin, they couldn't see anything else. So they couldn't shoot all game, and if they fell back, it would just give him the opportunity to charge me again in his turn. So I was like, I'm kind of just stuck there. So then I had to send the Hellbrute back that way to go try to dig them out. I actually ended up sending the Demon Prince back that way to dig them out. And I sent the Hellbrutes up here. The Hellbrutes, again, were fantastic. I was able to rapid ingress one in here, and then that one was able to jump out and basically single-handedly wiped out Azrael's unit, an ATV, and Samael's unit. Like, one Hellbrute just killed frickin' everything. So that was really good. The Dev Wounds from the Blessings came in clutch this game. That's one of the things that you need in order to have something like Khan the Betrayer's unit kill that entire Deathwing Knight unit. Even though they get the 4-up against that, it's better than them getting a 2-up or a 3-up save against all of your, chain blades. Being able to just go, cool, I'm just going to push you to a 4-up, feel no pain, is very, very effective. And the Fights on Death was also very, very useful in this. At the end of the game, I think all he had left was the Lion. I think everything else had been killed, because I had some Spawn and 8-bound here that kept jumping up and killing all of his Vanguard vets and ended up taking his home. I think he also had his Assassin left, his Calexis Assassin, or Calidus Assassin. But I think the way that this game worked out was that he had fewer units than I did, so I knew that my macro strategy was that I just need to make sure that I'm trading 1-for-1 unit with him, and if I can keep that trading pattern up, I'll end up with more units alive than him. Whereas if I let him trade trade something like the Lion for 2 or 3 of my units, well, now that's a serious problem. So I needed to make sure that each one of my units was killing at least one of his, and make sure that each one of his units was killing no more than one of mine. And I knew that if I kept that happening, I'd be fine. And that's what I was able to pull off, pretty effectively. And that got me the win. So yeah, really good game. Had potential to be really, really hard. It was really, really close up until turn 4. But then when he ran out of stuff, I was able to run away with it. So yeah, great game. And it was really good to see the undefeated on day 1. Alrighty, going into round 4 now, and I was playing against Mark Fidge, and he was running Astra Militarum, which is something that I've historically very much struggled into, and I've had some pretty embarrassing defeats at the hands of the Astra Militarum. But this game was a real ripper, and it was one of the most nerve-wracking games of 40k I've played in a long time. Because it was one of those situations where just everything was going wrong. I ended up getting a massive win out of it, but God, it was so on the razor's edge the whole game. So he had Gaunt's Ghost, he had Lord Solar, he had 2 Rogel Dawn's commanders. One of them had an enhancement that gave it like reroll 1s or something. Then he had 2 Tech Priests, which give those Rogel Dawns 4-up invulnerable saves, which is really, really good. He had a unit of Acadian Shock Troops, he had a couple of Tauroxes, he had a couple units of Rough Riders, he had a unit of Kassakan, he had 2 units of the Combat Engineers, then he had 3 Leman Russ Vanquishers, and a couple units of Scout Sentinels. So all around, he had a lot of things that make Guard very good into World Eaters, in that he had a lot of small units that he was able to use to push out screens and push out bubbles to prevent my deep strikes. He had the Dawns, which are fantastic at just like one-shotting a Berserker unit, or, very, very effective into things like 8-bound and Exalted 8-bound. They're even really effective into Chaos Spawn, so those Dawns were going to be a huge problem for me. The Rough Riders were actually really good for him because it meant that I couldn't just tag him in combat and do annoying stuff like that. It meant that he could dig himself out of combat quite effectively. There was tons of things in this list that I was like, that's a problem for me. So I knew it was going to be a challenging game, but it got significantly more challenging once the dice started rolling. So let's have a look at the scores, and then we'll get the map out and have a look at the games. Alright, so here's my scores into Mark. As you can see, it was a 100-61, so a very big score for me, and it was kind of miraculous that I was able to pull this off. I got maxed out my primary and my secondary, as you'd expect with 100. You can see here that I actually got quite lucky with the sequence of the card draws, and this is a really important thing to note, is that drawing certain cards is really, really good early in the game and really, really bad later in the game. But the inverse of that can happen, and you know in that first turn you draw behind enemy lines and like kill an enemy like overwhelming force or something like that. It can be really, really hard to score those. Whereas like tempting target and recover assets, very easy to score turn one. Mark for death and secure no man's land, really, really easy to score in that first turn. Extend battle lines, display of might, they're really easy to score mid-game, and that's when I drew the card. So I was quite lucky in that regard, and I think he was quite unlucky with some of his. Like, he drew Bring It Down in the first turn. I had a Rhino hidden, a Forge Fiend hidden, like he was going to really struggle to get that. There was a few instances where he drew cards that were not great, but as you can see, he did quite well in secondaries. You've got 36, that's a respectable score. Where he really struggled, and this is where Guard always struggle, is with the primary. He wasn't able to hold any objectives because I just kept pushing him off. He didn't have anything tough enough, and he was using all his small units to screen out and prevent me from, getting into him, but all of his big chunky units were staying back. And as a result, every time he'd put something on an objective, I'd just go, cool, spawn, go and kill it, and now he gets no primary. And then he shoots me off of it, I sticky the objective, and I get primary. So it was the primary was where I was able to win that game pretty comfortably. But let's have a look at the map and see how it went down. Here's a rough approximation of the map that we played. Now, there's one really important trick that I want to show you guys on this one, which is this objective down here. We were playing the diagonal one, Crucible of Battle, I think it is. And basically what I was able to do is deploy a Demon Prince behind here and some 8-bound behind here. And in the first turn, I was able to advance the Demon Prince out so that he was on this objective, touching it just at the back. And then I had the 8-bound tucked in behind the wall here, which meant that he was on the objective, but he was within 3 of the 8-bound. He couldn't see the 8-bound, so therefore he couldn't shoot them. And because the 8-bound was within 3 of the Demon Prince had lone op. So we had this situation where this objective here, the only way that he was going to be able to kill it, to stop me from scoring it, was if he sent something big all the way down here in order to get within range of that Demon Prince so that he could shoot him. And even then, I'd be able to sticky it if he did. So he really had to get on the objective, which meant he had to come all the way down this side of the board. And I had Khan's Berserkers hiding here, ready to respond to anything that tried. So he kind of just went, okay, I'm going to let Dean have that objective, and we're basically going to fight over the middle. This one was the 6 objective mission, where you have 1 in your home and then 4 stretched along the middle. And the terrain in the middle was a little bit angled, slightly different, but close enough. And basically, there was a few real clutch moments in this game. So the one strategy that I did really well was this one with the Demon Prince. That worked perfectly. There was one point where there was the 2 objectives here, and he had models on both of them. He had a bunch of stuff along here, and I basically realized that if I sent Khan out, I'd be able to kill all of that stuff, and that would get me my secure no man's land, and it would deny him primary, and it would remove a bunch of his screening pieces, which would then mean later in the game I could rapid ingress Hellbrutes and Exalted 8-bound more effectively. So I was like, yep, that's worth it. So I disembarked Khan's unit out, advanced them for an advance and charge, and I needed to roll a 5-inch charge to make it. And I failed it, and then I CP rerolled it, and I failed again. I rolled Snake Eyes, rerolled it into a 1 and a 2. And as a result, Khan's unit was just sitting in the open, and he was able to get all of his primary, and he was able to kill Khan's unit with no problems, which was an absolute disaster for me. I was like, I was almost thinking that's game over. Like, losing Khan's unit for 0 value and him keeping all of those pieces, I was like, how I will never financially recover from this. Like, I was like, this is a fucking nightmare. So he then picked up Khan's whole unit. Now I'm playing significantly down, so I'm like, you know what? It's a Hail Mary time. I need to pull off a miracle here to get back in the game. So I had a Hellbrute that was hiding in here somewhere, so he ran out. I had a Demon Prince that was down here, he ran up. I deep striked my Exalted 8-bound and went for a 9-inch charge, because I was like, I need to take advantage of this opportunity. And he had a Dawn over in the corner here, and a couple of Lehman Russ as well. So I was like, if I can pull off some charges here, I can get myself back in the game. So I rolled first I rolled the 6-inch charge on a Hellbrute, failed it. Then I CP rerolled it, failed that. Then I rolled a 7-inch charge on my Demon Prince, failed that. And then I rolled the 9-inch charge on my Exalted 8-bound and failed that. And I was just like, unfucking believable. Like, I've literally failed every charge this game. Khan's unit failed, all of this stuff failed. I'm like, I am in so much trouble here. Like, this is going to be an absolute embarrassment. I knew I was way ahead on points at the time, but I was like, this is turn 3, I'm going to get tabled, and then he's just going to get 15s and run away with it. So I'm like, well, that's game over. I was like, let's play it out, see how close it is. And then in his turn, he proceeded to simultaneously make a few bad targeting decisions and roll poorly, and then I happened to roll really well with my invulnerable saves, and it actually swung me back into the game. So basically, he then positioned stuff over here. He shot at target priority on the Demon Prince and the Hellbrute, when in my opinion, he should have been prioritizing the Slaughterbound and the Exalted 8-bound. He fired at them, and then basically he killed the Hellbrute, but he failed to kill the Demon Prince. The 4-up invulnerable saves were just popping off. So he failed to kill the Demon Prince, and he did no damage to the Exalted 8-bound unit. So then when we ticked over into my next turn, that Exalted 8-bound unit jumped out and killed a Russ and a Dawn. The Demon Prince jumped out, wiped out a unit of infantry that was over here. There was some 8-bound left that were hiding over here. They jumped out and killed a few things over on this side of the board. And within that one turn, I'd ended up with just those couple of units. I pushed all of his stuff off objectives. I pushed him way back into his own deployment zone, and swung the game back in my favor, because now he didn't have the stuff needed to kill me over here. The only other thing that was really interesting was there was one turn where he had a Dawn over here and a Vanquisher over here. That was what came around and shot Khan's unit and killed it. When he came around to do that, I rapid ingressed a Hellbrute behind the wall here. So he's got the Dawn and the Vanquisher there. That Hellbrute then ran around the side here, charged, hit the Vanquisher, killed the Vanquisher, piled into the Dawn, hit the Dawn, killed the Dawn as well. So I had one Hellbrute run around here and killed both of those vehicles. And I think that's why when it came to that turn 3 over here, that's why he targeted the Hellbrute first, because he was like, that thing has to go, because that thing's a massive problem. But yeah, unfortunately for him, he failed to kill the Hellbrute. He failed to kill the Demon Prince and the Exalted 8-bound, and the Exalted 8-bound are actually the main thing that's super scary in the list for a guard army. And yeah, so that was the game. So it was a real bloody game, and it was one of those games where I was just like getting absolutely tilted by the dice rolls. And my opponent was just like, he's like, I'm going to go buy you a beer because this is fucked. Like, you're getting absolutely diced here. And I'm like, I know, but it happens. And this is one of the things, is you can't beat yourself up too much, because you never know when the dice are going to turn back in your favor. And sometimes there can be that one clutch roll, even late in the game, that can flip it and get you back involved. Such as, like, he threw like a couple of Vanquishers and a Dawn at my Demon Prince, all their big guns at the Demon Prince. And I was just, every time he was like, this is a D6 plus 6 damage shot, and I'm like, yep, 4-up invulnerable save, past it. And that Demon Prince surviving was massive, because it meant that I got discounted strats in the next turn. It meant that I was able to send him out and do some damage with him. It was just massively impactful having him still alive. So not giving up when Khan's unit failed that 5-inch rerollable, not giving up when 3 units failed, 6 or 7-inch charges, and just persevering really paid off for me in this game.
G'day guys, want to join us and become an Exalted Wargamer? Then check out our Patreon. Show your support for the free YouTube content with a monthly supporter subscription. Think of it like buying me a beer to say thanks, mate. Gain access to the Exalted community, including our Discord server, where we discuss everything from tactics, strategy, list writing advice, to memes, banter, and hobby updates. Join Team Exalted for more direct coaching and advice in preparation for upcoming events, and get tailored advice for key meta environments and matchups, or help working through some of the more challenging and complex aspects of Warhammer 40k. Or become part of the Exalted Inner Circle for access to private one-on-one coaching, including video calls and more, a dedicated coaching service aimed to provide mentorship and drive real improvement. Check out exalted40k.com for more information and become an Exalted Wargamer today.
Alrighty, now we go into the final game of RatCon 2025, round 5, into Adam Camilleri. Now, you guys probably know him from Art of War Down Under. He's a very prolific streamer and content creator, and he's one of the best players in Victoria. He's been on Team Victoria several times. He's been on Team Australia before. He's an absolute weapon on the tabletop, so I knew that this was going to be a very hard matchup, and Adam and I were effectively playing off for the win. The winner of this game was going to walk home with that belt. So it was a really, really tight game. Adam and I are also very close friends, so it was really interesting to see us like lock horns like that, where we're just like, okay, we're great mates, but currently we're enemies, but we'll be great mates again in 3 hours. But for the next 3 hours, you're my enemy, and you're standing between me and that trophy. So it was a really, really interesting game. Now, he had Imperial Knights. He was running the Gate Warden Lance, which is, I think, it's one of the new detachments. It has a really interesting rule where you draw a line between 2 objective markers, and then everything that's on that line gets like all these sick abilities. So he had a Knight Defender who can hand out a token to give one of his armigers neg-1 damage, which can be a real problem for World Eaters. He had a Knight Errant. He had a Knight Paladin. Then he had 3 Armiger Warglaves. He had a Calidus Assassin, a Ministorum Priest, Sisters of Battle Immolator, and a Sisters of Battle squad. So not a lot of stuff, but some really big, scary things. Really, really cool list, and it's something that I think World Eaters would be typically very heavily favoured into. But there was one thing about RatCon that made this matchup way harder than it needed to be. So let's have a look at that feature, shall we? So, one of the things that RatCon is renowned for is every year, the final round of the event, they give every player a model to take home. And it's always rat themed because it's RatCon. That's the sort of the theme of the event. And in previous years, it's been something that's relatively uneventful in the game. It doesn't really impact the game much. Like one of them was they gave a little bomb rat that you could deploy it, and it was kind of like a spore mine. You could run it into your opponent and it would do mortal wounds, but that was it. Like it was just a one and done kind of thing. This year, they went a little crazy, and they basically created this thing called a Warlock Engineer. I've got a photo of the data sheet here. I'm not sure if you can read it. It's a little bit blurry. But he's basically just like a mid-level beatstick kind of character with a little bit of shooting, a little bit of combat. He's kind of a little bit tough, but not super tough. Nothing really so crazy about him, except he has this ability called Overseer of the Engines. And basically, he can pick a terrain feature and fortify it. And this had massive, effect in the game, because that fortified terrain piece has a rule where enemy units that are in that terrain piece lose charge bonuses, which means they don't gain fights first. Which means if he's in that terrain feature and I charge him and I end in that terrain feature with my charge move, I don't have fights first, which means he fights before me. So it effectively means that all of his units that were within that terrain feature got fights first. And fights first on Imperial Knights is a fucking nightmare. So the very existence of this little rat made this go from an easy matchup to an extremely hard one. Alright, so as you can see, here's the scores, and I got a 77-76 win. So really, really tight game. Really, really tight. And as you can see, I got a 42 on primary, he got a 37. I got a 25 on secondaries, he got a 29. So he got me by secondaries, but I got him by primary, and it came right down to the wire. As you can see, most of the game I was kind of struggling. Like you can see, I got nothing in the first turn. Drawing Mark for Death and Assassinate is an absolute nightmare. But he also didn't score particularly well in his first couple of turns. And then we both started scoring quite well towards the end. So it was a really, really tight game the whole way along. Let's flip over and have a look at the map, and I'll walk you through some of the situations that happened, and also walk you through how I was able to play around that whole fights first scenario thanks to that engine sear. So this is a rough approximation of the map that we played on, and basically these two pieces here, think of them like they were slightly bigger L's instead of these flat pieces. And basically what happened is I did the same trick. I was deployed down here. I had the 8-bound behind here, the Demon Prince in front on the objective. So he couldn't shoot the Demon Prince, he couldn't take that objective off me. And then we were basically trading for the center objective. he had in this big L, he had his whole army in there. Basically, he had 2 big knights and 2 armigers that were all touching that terrain piece. And then he was using that engineer to make it so that if I ended in that terrain piece, I wouldn't get to fight first in the combat phase. So that was going to be an absolute nightmare for me to deal with. And basically, this center objective is where a lot of the action happened. So in the first turn, I threw a spawn out on there. Then in his turn, he shot the spawn off, and I was able to sticky that objective on death. So that gave me an advantage in the primary. Then in the next turn, we essentially did the same thing. But in that second turn, I basically pulled off a really, really complex play in order to play around this fights first. So if you want to learn how to do this, check out my fights phase masterclass, because I break that down in detail. But basically what happened is he had an armiger that was like roughly here, and the big knights inside. So what I did is I rapid ingressed over here, and I charged that armiger, but I made sure that I had the 6-inch pylon and consolidate active, and I made sure that I'd strung out the unit so that when I charged, one guy would end in base contact and the other guys couldn't end in base. So then those other guys just went along the side of that ruin instead of going in. So the guy that was in base contact was not in the ruin, and the other guys were beside it. They were not in the ruin either. Which then meant when we tick over into the fight phase after that charge, because I'm not in the ruin, I do gain the charge bonus and I do fight first. So then I was able to go, cool, now I'm going to select that unit to fight. I'm going to pile in with it, make its attacks into the big knight, killing the big knight, and then I'm going to consolidate back into the little knight over here so that I'm back out of the terrain. It was really, really complex play, and it required me rolling a very specific charge, because if I rolled too high, I was probably going to end up in a situation where I'd end up with guys having to get into that terrain piece, which I didn't want. But I managed to roll sufficient on the dice rolls. I was able to get in, and that was able to eliminate one of his big knights. Because the problem here is if he had those big knights in there and had fights first on him, he can see almost the entire board from that point. And I'm going to really struggle to get anything, because he's just going to keep blasting me off the objectives. But I was able to secure this one with Lone Op, and then I was able to secure this one with stickying on the death, and that really helped keep me in the game. So I did that to kill one big knight. Then in the next turn, I was able to send Khan's berserkers out, charge down here into the one of the little knight and did the same thing. So I charged the little knight, couple berserkers base contacted there, the rest of them couldn't, so therefore they strung along the front of this ruin and then piled in. And in that one, I got a big knight from full health down to 2 wounds remaining. So really disappointing that I didn't quite get the kill. It's partly because I needed the 6-inch pylon and consolidate in order to get in. And in order to kill knights with Khan's unit, you kind of want sustained and lethal hits, whereas I just had lethal hits and the 6-inch pylon and consolidate. In like reflecting on it, what I probably should have done is done that charge, but then also fought somewhere else and turned on a 3rd blessing. And if I had done that, turned on a 3rd blessing and gave them sustained lethals and the 6-inch pylon and consolidate, then I would have got the kill. But basically, yeah, that charge, it worked, but it didn't quite get the desired result. Didn't kill the knight, and then in return, he picked up that whole unit. Khan then gets back up at the end of the phase. Then we tick over into my final turn, and I got really good cards on that final turn. I got no prisoners and bring it down, which into an Imperial Knights army is just free. I sent a Hellbrute out. The Hellbrute was able to kill the Rhino and an Armiger, and then I sent Khan into a wounded Armiger and killed it as well. So got maximum on those scores, and that was able to get me just over the line. So it was a really, really tight game. It was really, really technical because I had to play around fights first, which personally is one of my favorite things in 40k to do. Playing around fights first is really challenging, which makes it really, really rewarding when you're able to pull it off, and I was able to pull it off quite well here. I think if he didn't have that ruin, and if he didn't have that fights first ability on his guys from the mission, I would have ran through him. I would have been able to just go, cool, I'm just going to drop here where you can't see me, and I'm just going to charge through, and I'm going to kill 2 big knights in a turn, and it's game over for you. But because I couldn't do that, it became really interesting. The neg 1 damage that he had, normally that would be a nightmare for World Eaters, because most of our stuff is 2 damage, but I'm not sure whether it was that he was placing it on the wrong armiger, or whether it was that he wasn't playing aggressively enough with his armigers, but it basically never came up. I basically was never hitting the armiger that had neg 1 damage on it. He'd put it on this armiger, and I'd go attack that one. Then next turn he'd put it on one over here, and I'd go and attack the one over here. Like, I just kept playing around it, and just like basically not letting him get value out of that rule. That worked really, really well for me. And basically the game, because it came down to a single point, there was one clutch play where he was basically going to deep strike his assassin and go for a 9-inch charge into my little rat engineer. And that rat engineer also had a rule where basically it said if you kill it, you get the assassinate secondary, even if you haven't drawn it yet. Was one of the other mission special rules. So they got a little janky on this last mission. And basically he was going to rip for a 9-inch charge to do that. He got the 9-inch charge, but then when he goes in, he hitting on 3s and he rolled like 3 1s. CP re-rolled one of them into a 2, so he missed with most of his attacks. And then rolling to wound, he was rolling like 1s and 2s. So he just failed to kill me. So that was the anticlimactic end of the game. But we basically shook hands on it. It was a 77-76 win for me. And that secured me the win for the event. So that's a really, really exciting way to round out the event. I was playing against the most competent player in the event, arguably. Like, Adam's an absolute master of the game. So I was playing a really hard game. He also had a heavy advantage with the mission because he was able to get that fights first on those big knights, which makes it really hard for the World Eaters player. And all in all, it came down to the absolute wire. It was a fantastic game. I was really saved by being able to sticky that center objective, and the lone op demon prince was great. And the Hellbrutes were just fantastic in this matchup. You know, one of them going in and killing a rhino and then an armiger to get 2 kills for no pris and 2 bring it downs is just insane value for something that's 120 points. But yeah, so that's how that game went down. Alrighty, so there we have it, guys. That is RatCon 2025 wrapped up. It was an absolutely ripper event. The guys in Ballarat do an absolutely fantastic job. I highly recommend you check out their events. RatCon is their more fluffy kind of event where they have that janky character model added in the last mission. They do a ton of really cool stuff. They have painting in there as well, which is a factor in your overall placings. It doesn't affect best generals and stuff like that, so if you want to play competitive 40k, it's still perfectly viable. But they also try to make additional rewards for those who do put the extra effort into painting their armies. And as a result, you see some truly beautiful armies on display at RatCon. The Ballarat guys, they also do Radicalism, which is their more competitive one where they don't have anything like that. It's just pure hardlined WTC, ITC style 40k. So check them out at RatCon 40k on Facebook. They do a fantastic job. I've got massive amounts of respect for these guys. And they put on a fantastic event. So I had a great time. I want to thank every one of my opponents. I had some ripper games. I didn't have a single problem with a single opponent. Every single game was smooth. Everyone played clean. There was no drama. It was absolutely fantastic. So thanks again for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and you would like to show your support for the channel, like, subscribe, comment, head over to exalted40k.com where you can pick up some merchandise if you want to show your support that way. Or you can join our community over on Patreon if you want to support that way. There's tons of things you can do there to show your support whilst picking up some sweet swag, or maybe signing up for our coaching service and things like that as well. So check it out. I really appreciate all of the support that I continue to get from you guys. It means the world to me. And with that being said, we're going to leave it here. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.